Hello, folks. Welcome. We'll get started in about a minute or two as people are hopping online. So just stay tuned for a little bit. Okay, Grace, if you want to kick us off and then we'll jump in.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Good evening, everyone. Hello. My name is Grace Sullivan Zirkle. I serve as the Associate Director for New Student and Family Programs. We are thrilled to all of our families who are joining us tonight to learn a little bit more about the Office of Climate and Sustainability at Duke, as well as Duke's climate commitment. We are joined by a few colleagues who are going to share more this evening. Before we dive in, I'm just going to do quick housekeeping. If you have joined our webinars before, you know what's coming, but I'll just name it. We are recording this Zoom so that it will be available later. So if you hear that gem of wisdom and you want to hear it again and write it down, just know that we are recording and we'll post this webinar. Give us about 48 hours after the session ends so that we can transcribe it and get it online. If you have questions throughout the presentation, at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A. That is where you can type your questions. We're going to hold off most questions until the end, but I don't want you to lose your train of thought. So if you think of something inspired by what Jason or Sophia are sharing, go ahead and type it in, and that will help us get to those questions at the end of the session. That is it for our little housekeeping. I am going to hand things over to my colleague, Jason Elliott.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace, for pulling this together, and welcome, folks, wherever you are in the world. Really excited to talk about climate and sustainability at Duke. My name is Jason Elliott, and I'm the Assistant Director of Engagement and Communications for Sustainable Duke. I'm joined today by Sophia. Sophia wants to introduce herself real quick.
Hey, good evening, folks. It's a funny experience to be talking to you without seeing you here on the webinar side of our screen, but I'm really excited for this conversation. My name is Sophia Mastroelli, and I serve as the engagement coordinator at Sustainable Duke. So we'll dive into a bit more of what we do in our world in a minute, but really excited for this discussion.
Yeah. So like Grace said, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll do them all at the very end. So please feel free to add them as we're going along. Sophia might punch out some answers while we're actually chatting. But I'm going to start screen sharing our presentation deck. So climate and sustainability at Duke. Some of you probably have heard some things, but we've been doing quite a bit of work ever since the launch of the climate commitment, as well as the launch of our office back in 2004. So really excited to kind of see the work that has kind of happened over the past 2 decades, and really seeing how what's next. How are we going to keep launching ourselves into the future? So today we're going to cover a few things. First, we're going to define sustainability. It's how we generally start all of our presentations, regardless of audience, to make sure that we are all calibrated in how we're talking about it. Then we'll give a quick overview of climate sustainability at Duke. This is not going to cover everything because we don't have hours and hours and hours with you, but hopefully it's enough just to get your mind working about the things that we're already doing. And then we'll focus mostly on ways that your student can get involved. And we'll have plenty of time in the end for Q&A. So defining sustainability, I always ask this, and because we don't have a chat feature, I won't ask you to do this, but when you think of sustainability, what types of words come to your mind? Often people will go towards recycling, riding your bicycle, renewable energy, and those types of things, which are all definitely part of it. Sustainability was first defined back in late 80s with the Brundtland Report that kind of talks about development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I always love this definition, but there's so many questions like meets the needs of the present. Whose needs are we talking about? Are we talking about humans' needs? Are we talking about animals' needs, plants' needs, the world's needs? And the ability of future generations of what? Similar questions. Is it us as humans? Is it our animals? Is it plants and other life on the planet? So always a fun way to get started in this type of world. But when we talk about sustainability at Duke, we look at it through three different pillars. So first, environment. This is where most people find themselves when they're sharing ideas. So like making sure that we have clean air, good water quality, making sure that our cities are resilient to climate change, protecting our ecosystems, biodiversity, greenhouse gas emissions, diverting our waste from landfills and hopefully more towards composting and recycling, or not having waste at all. But we also like to think about societal impacts. So food security, making sure that everybody has the resources they need to maintain themselves, diversity, human health and wellness, safe neighborhoods, healthy communities, social justice, quality education, and then economics. So infrastructure, true cost of energy, sustainable growth, economic justice, return on investment, affordable housing, fair trade practices. And these are just a few examples. And the reason why we like to have this broader definition of sustainability is at the end of the day, we think that everybody, regardless of their academic career or their future careers in life or where they're finding themselves in the world, can infuse sustainability into their work. They might not readily have the title sustainability director, but regardless of what they're doing, they probably can see themselves in some of these elements. Now, to take it one step further, the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations are another way to really think about how climate sustainability shows up in our day-to-day work and lives. And you'll see, these are some huge goals, and these are global goals of like no poverty and zero hunger. Realizing that I, Jason Elliott, may not be the one who makes the world zero hunger, but maybe I can think about how we do that in my neck of the woods, whether it's in my neighborhood, my broader community, at Duke University. And the other topics that are in here, gender equality, having a quality education, climate action like reducing emissions, peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnerships and collaborations, things that all come into this like broader definition of sustainability. And we really appreciate that because we're finding more and more students resonate with these types of terms versus the traditional ways that we define sustainability a decade or so ago. And so I highly recommend everybody to paint with a broad brush here because there's a lot of opportunities if you start to look for them. So bringing it now closer to home, thinking about sustainability and climate work at Duke University. So if anybody has ever visited, you will notice that our campus, compared to many other campuses across the nation, we are a campus in the forest. Not literally just because we have Duke Forest, which is 7,000 plus acres, but also recognizing that anywhere you go on campus, we're just surrounded by trees. And that was really intentional from the get-go, hundreds of years or 100 years ago when we were first thinking about what Duke University should and could look like. If you see this photo on the side here, this is actually an artist rendering when campus was first being visioned. Does it look like this today? Absolutely not. There's many more buildings in this picture than are in the real world than are in this picture. But you can see like behind the chapel, the tall building in the photo, there's some woods there. And those chapel woods still exist today. They're actually some of the spaces that we've preserved permanently on campus. The other thing, recognizing that you go to school to learn and to share your knowledge. So using this knowledge in service to society is a very important cornerstone of Duke University. There's so many things that we should and could be doing, and how we're taking this knowledge and sharing it with the world is a very important part of our work. We're a university, so obviously we have an educational mission. So how are we infusing climate and sustainability across all 10 schools at Duke University, including Trinity, where most of your students might be coming into, or Pratt School of Engineering are some examples, but we also have the School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and a business school. Efficient use of resources, so thinking more about the operational efforts on campus. This is where we often find our Sustainable Duke work, trying to think about ways that we're reducing energy and water use, making sure that waste is not just going to a landfill, making sure that we're not purchasing things unnecessarily is a definitely important part of our day-to-day work. But keeping in mind that Duke University is made up of 50,000 employees and almost 20,000 students, there's a lot of resources that we do need, but how can we use them most effectively? And then lastly, branding and leadership. A lot of the work that has happened on campus to date has helped launch us far into the lead of many other peer schools in climate sustainability. And I'm really excited about that legacy that we're able to leave, that we're infusing with our students who are then taking that and sharing that with whatever jobs they work at in the future, but also like the community that we have built on campus, being able to be really proud of the work that's been done. So a little bit of history. So like I mentioned, we started back in 2004 when we hired our first sustainability staff. It was actually a graduating senior with a resume in hand saying we should have a sustainability office, and he was hired. And that was a really great way for us to start and put our flag in the ground. But in 2007, when we signed the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, or ACUPCC for short, stating that we would be carbon neutral by 2024, which is this year. We are the first of our IB Plus school peers, which means a lot of people are looking at us wondering, like, how are we doing it? And I'll share a little bit of that journey later today. But once you set a goal, you also have to develop a strategy to meet that goal. And so over the between 2007 and 2009, a lot of work across campus, as well as hiring some really amazing third-party consultants to help create our first climate action plan. And that's the rule book that helps us reduce our energy use, our transportation impact, waste, et cetera, all across campus. But it focuses mostly on greenhouse gas emissions. And when it comes to sustainability, that's not where we stop. And so we also, in 2011, developed a sustainability strategic plan. And in a few slides, I'll go into more detail about that. But having to take into account water use. Maybe there's not really always a direct emissions tie, but it's definitely something that's really, really important for Duke University to consider. Because a lot of things happened between 2009 and 2019, we updated our climate action plan. We had a lot of assumptions, like we would have a national carbon tax, which we are no closer to today than we were 15 years ago. And so it's really interesting to kind of see how our assumptions in 2009 really evolved and how many of those assumptions changed, but sometimes in a good way, where we actually had more ability to do like renewable energy than we did in 2009. So one of the things that we will be coming online next year is 101 megawatts of solar power for Duke University, which is about 50% of our entire campus use, which is really exciting for us because that was something that we couldn't really do readily in North Carolina until 2019. And so I'm really excited to see those types of opportunities that presented themselves over that different decade. In 2021, one of the biggest steps that actually led to the creation of the Duke Climate Commitment, which we'll talk about a little bit more soon, but we had a board of trustees, which is our highest echelon of decision makers at Duke University, really saying like, hey, what should we be doing and how can we be further leaders in this space? So we met for an entire year with all the folks on the board of trustees to really think about not just the operational world, which, like I said, we find ourselves in, but education, research, community engagement, as well as external engagement, such as like policy making, engaging with other universities, et cetera. And because of that, we launched the Big Duke Climate Commitment. And you can easily, I'll share a link to this so you can go and see all the things that are going into that. But here we are in 2024, we'll meet our carbon neutrality goal, and then we'll keep going forward, continuing making campus more sustainable. So as of July 1st, 2023, we really needed some governance structure to think about. We have these big ambitious goals. How do we actually put them into practice? And so the Office of Climate and Sustainability was formed, which is different than when I say Sustainable Duke. We are a part of it, but so is Duke Forest, Duke Gardens, the Duke Campus Farm, and the Nicholas Institute for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability. If you ever come to campus, you probably have been to Duke Gardens. I highly encourage the next time you come to campus, check out Duke Forest. And so many of these opportunities that are basically sustainability and climate work in action is the way that students will find their pathway to us. Because a lot of folks will go to the Duke Campus Farm, never have been on a farm before in their life, and actually like grow their own food, but also get to talk about food systems locally. With the Nicholas Institute, that's where you're going to find your policy makers. And that is where we find a lot of our students who are wanting to do public policy, economics work, et cetera, will find some really great opportunities either through internships or through classes that they can take with that group. Duke Gardens needs no additional introduction, but obviously it's a great space to unwind after a very busy week of classes. And Duke Forest, that is where I found myself. I got my master's in forestry from Duke, and that was such an amazing, like, it's our largest living laboratory on campus. And so I'm definitely a huge fan of that space. So I mentioned earlier the climate commitment. A lot of people are wondering, like, well, what is it? And so the vision is we will work across the university to focus on creating sustainable and equitable solutions to the climate crisis that will place entire world society on a path to resilient, flourishing, net zero carbon world by 2050. So obviously Duke University is going to be carbon neutral by 2024, but getting an entire world to move towards that goal is a lot more work. And so how are we helping activate our other peers in terms of educational institutions, governments locally and internationally, as well as just individuals? And so we've kind of broken this into 5 categories. So climate education, our big goal is that every student graduating from Duke is fluent in climate sustainability. What that actually means, it's really tricky because every student, like I was accounting and economics, another student might be environmental studies, another student might be wanting to study law, another one might be wanting to study medicine. We don't want to be prescriptive and telling a student, you must do this, because that is generally not a good pathway to making somebody want to learn. But realizing that we can work with the deans of all the schools at Duke University to say, hey, here's our mandate. How do you see you fitting into this? And what are things that you can do? One of my favorites is our School of Medicine being able to say, like, okay, we get it, climate change is happening. We're actually noticing a lot of asthma risk locally in Durham and other bigger cities. But what is actually happening? And we as medical providers need to really be thinking about the environment that the people are growing up in. So we're making sure that we're giving them proper care. With climate research, this is a photo of Heather Stapleton, who studies environmental health, which is the presence of toxics in the things that we purchase every day, like furniture, flooring, paint, water supplies. And her work has been, sometimes it's terrifying, but I think it's incredibly useful, because being able to excavate the things that are around us to understand how we can make better decisions is the type of research we need to be doing. And so Heather Stapleton, as well as the hundreds of other labs across campus, we have students who get to work in them. And so I highly recommend, depending on your students' interests, they might be interested in mushrooms. So we have a mycology lab. They might be really interested in human research. And so we have at Duke University, the Center for Advanced Hindsight, which is helping figure out, why do we not always act in a rational pattern? Mainly because we're irrational. But it's those types of things that students can participate in, either as research subjects sometimes, but actually being in there in the lab, working on their own research is a really great way for them to launch their future careers. I already talked a little bit about sustainable operations, and we'll talk about it more in the next slide, so I'm going to hold off on that one. Community partnerships. Duke University has a global presence. So when we say community, we mean wherever Duke University finds itself. Obviously, yes, we have a main campus in Durham, North Carolina. We have a marine lab that's in Beaufort, North Carolina. We also have some satellite medical facilities all throughout North Carolina that people can participate in. But we also have international campuses, such as the one in Kunshan, China. And so recognizing that these types of collaborations and partnerships and building this community is very important. Because at the end of the day, when your student comes to live in Durham for 9 months out of a year, they're citizens of Durham. So we want them to make sure that they're engaging in they might engage in your hometown. We want to make sure that they realize that they're citizens of this space. And then lastly, external engagement. I mentioned earlier, policymaking, et cetera, how we partner with peer schools. Right now, this is a picture of Governor's Island in New York, where we're actually working on a collaboration between corporate, university and colleges, as well as NGOs, kind of think about climate sustainability. And so we're building a hub that should be open in 2028 is my understanding. But really excited to see how these partnerships and collaborations coalesce together, because at the end of the day, we're not going to make it without building these relationships. And all of these things have to center justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, because at the end of the day, if people are left out of decision-making processes in any of these spheres, we're going to realize that we might not come up with optimal solutions. So it's definitely a key cornerstone of this work. So mention the sustainability strategic plan. This is that operational sustainability that I was mentioning. So you will easily see, like I've already talked a little bit about greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon neutrality goal by this year, but we have to think about the energy used in buildings, whether it's coming from renewable energy resources, whether it's stuff that we can make our buildings more energy efficient, et cetera. Buildings, we have hundreds of buildings on campus, and realizing that when we're building them and constructing them, we don't make sure that we're doing them in a really good way that makes sure that they last for a long time. And so we will follow things like LEED protocols to make sure that our buildings are sustainable as possible. Water use, we talked about this one back in 2008. Durham experienced a major drought. There was like 1 month of water, like potable water kind of left. And we had to realize, well, Duke University being the major water user in the city and county of Durham, we had to think about, well, what can we do to reduce our use? And so you actually see pictured right here in the pond. And this is a way for us to actually capture stormwater runoff and use that in our chilled water plant that helps condition certain aspects of our campus. And this saves us 100 million gallons of water a year. 100 million is really hard to keep in mind, but that was basically 1/8 of the water that we were using on campus. And so I'm really excited that these types of initiatives, as well as some buildings have their own cisterns for irrigation work, but we've also done a lot of like changing out faucets and shower heads to make sure that they're more water efficient. Natural resources, like I mentioned, we're a university in the forest, but that's not where it stops. We don't just have trees, we have all these thriving ecosystems. And so right here is a picture of Duke Garden has been doing a lot of prairie restoration, and prairies are just wonderful grasslands that can be really great overwintering habitat for so many things like birds and bugs, et cetera. And so next time you're in the gardens, definitely walk over to the prairie because it's a really cool space. Food, we all eat it, we all interact with it. And this is usually a vehicle that most people find themselves coming to sustainability is like, how do I make sure that the diet that I'm eating is not contributing to climate change? And so students on campus can easily go and volunteer at the Duke Campus Farm or get a job where they're like working on the field, getting their hands in the dirt. And that's a really great way for folks to really engage with it. But you can also learn about food through the classes that people take. And there's a variety of them. Always happy to share a list later. Transportation, and when we talk about transportation, it's both the buses that we use on campus. This is a picture of one of our electric buses on campus, but also we have people who are flying to and from Duke to do research, going to conferences all across the world. Students are studying abroad. So really need to think about that air travel aspect. And the last piece, employee commuting particularly. We have, like I said, 50,000 employees. So how are they getting to and from campus is definitely an important aspect. Next one, waste. And so we have, we're a big school. We generate waste, but how are we making sure that that waste is not unnecessarily going to a landfill? That's actually a picture of our a football game we did last fall. That was our climate commitment football game where we actually had some fan engagement of proper waste sorting. And then whichever student like did the best won like a crown or whatever it was. But it was a really great way to educate not just our Duke population, but 40,000 guests who are at that game. And so that's a really interesting way for us to build in some of this community engagement, both local and farther away. Procurement, if you ever talk to me about swag, happy to talk about it anytime. But realizing that the things that we purchase, we want to make sure that they're as sustainable as possible. There's a lot of things that we purchase that are potentially unnecessary, but recognizing that we have our new sustainable procurement plan or purchasing plan that we're using to guide a lot of conversations on campus. And I'm really excited to keep seeing that keep being put into place all across campus. And then lastly, education and communication. This is what Sophia and we do a lot of this type of work where we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. But this is a photo of our students at our Project Earth orientation program, which is a week-long program. And they were doing community service, but also learning about how to properly maintain and take care of trees. And so like, these are the types of things that you might think about education solely in the classroom. We like to take it out of the classroom and really try to solidify these lessons that are learned in the classroom by actually doing applied learning. So I mentioned greenhouse gases. Some people are really interested, like how well are you doing? So we've done a lot since 2007. Discontinued the use of coal on campus. We actually used to have a train that would come and drop off coal multiple times a day. Now we use more natural gas and renewable energy on site, which is great. Still have ways to work towards it. As you can see, steam plant fuel, meaning the natural gas that we use, is still a big contributor to our emissions on site. Building and plant efficiency upgrades. So like when I say plant, I mean like our utility plants, not like trees and things like that. But all of our buildings on campus really trying to find ways to reduce their energy use, because every amount of energy that we're reducing, saves money for the departments that exist in those buildings, which can potentially reduce tuition, which also makes sure that we're meeting our targets when it comes to carbon neutrality. Grid level decarbonization, we purchase most of our electricity from Duke Energy, which is our local utility provider. And over the past decade and a half, they've also been reducing their energy, their carbon content of the energy that they're providing. And so I'm really excited to keep seeing this, as they have set a carbon neutrality goal by 2050, and we are a part of trying to make sure that that happens. And then lastly, you'll see like, this is just from this past year, but like COVID impact on transportation was massive, where we used to have a lot of commuting and air travel emissions, and they're now slowly creeping back up as we're returning back to normal. But it allowed for a lot of conversations on campus. Like, here I am presenting from home. I can work from home occasionally. So can like the thousands and thousands of other folks at campus. And so I think that is something that I'm hoping we'll keep maintaining over time, as we need to really start driving down these transportation related emissions. Some of the future strategies that we're hoping to do, I already mentioned the offsite solar development, which will come online next year. This means probably not much to most people, but we typically use steam to heat our buildings across campus. But most of our buildings don't need that high level of heat content. So we're doing things like transitioning that to hot water, so that way we're not wasting as much energy as possible. Fleet electrification is a big one. If any of you own an electric vehicle, you can understand that there are a lot of benefits, both cost and maintenance wise. And we can also similarly benefit from that by doing some fleet electrification on campus. We've already been doing it with our electric buses, and just being able to see the cost savings year over year has been really astounding. Has actually led to a long-term plan to keep transitioning our buses to electric. And the last one, air travel. That is a thing that has swung all the way back up, because conferences are now back in real life. People are wanting to study abroad more again. People are also going to a lot of conferences. So recognizing we have to start thinking about like, well, if this is a core function of the university, because doing research, going to conferences, and studying abroad is a core function, how are we actually going to reduce those emissions? So a lot of conversations to happen. But since 2007, we've reduced our emissions by around 40%. And we'll continue to reduce them going forward, especially when solar comes online next year. That'll be another big drop. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing our work going towards carbon neutrality fully. Right now, we'll use some carbon offsets, and I'm happy to talk about that if anybody has any questions. So now we're pivoting to ways your student can get involved. And the first one, all first-year students have a required common experience reading. And so this year, Sustainable Duke submitted a bunch of books. Thank you, Grace and team, for reviewing all of them. But we're going to have all students read All We Can Save, which is a wonderful anthology written by 60 different women about climate and sustainability. And the goal is to take this as like a choose your own adventure, because all these different chapters, there's not always going to be a connecting story that you might read in a traditional book, but people will be able to find their road through this book, hopefully finding like, there might be some that are more economics focused. There might be some that are more public policy focused, some more social economic justice focused. So we're really excited about this. Our entire team, we're kind of collaborating with a lot of partners across campus to identify ways to think about like, well, how can you include this in your curriculum? What speakers can we bring to campus next fall? How can we infuse this into our orientation programming by having some conversations? And the reason why I included this little diagram at the bottom is a lot of people are pretty anxious about climate change, especially our younger students coming in. And so having deep dialogue about the climate crisis, both like the hopes and dreams as well as the fears and concerns they have, is definitely a cornerstone of this work. But the best panacea that we've identified is actually building community around climate solutions. So that way folks don't feel like they're by themselves. You can actually get a lot more done too. And so hopefully through that, we'll actually get to advancing climate action. So I'm really excited to be able to provide this as an opportunity for students to get their feet wet, and not just the students that we normally interact with, but actually like almost 2,000 plus students who are going to all interact with this content over the summer, and we'll hopefully infuse it throughout the fall semester. And if you want to read it, you're definitely welcome. It's a wonderful book. We also have orientation programming. I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but this is one of the first ways that we engage with students when they first literally come on campus. You all drop them off, make sure they get into their dorms room, you leave, and then we take it from there. And so we are just one element of project or of orientation. There's 20-ish other tracks that people can do. And some of them are around like food and farming. And so your student might be really interested in that topic. What we try to do with Project Earth, or our climate sustainability orientation, is try to introduce them to each other. Because like I said, community building is key. Especially because you're coming to campus that's brand new to you, you want friends, but also being able to build that community that Sophia and I will still see our students, even if they were like with us 3 years ago, still see them eating lunch together and having dinner together, which is a really wonderful way to see the long lasting impact of a program like this. But also we want to introduce them to Duke broadly, but also to Durham, get them outside of the Duke bubble a little bit, just to get them a little bit more comfortable. So some of the things like, we engage with beauty and nature firsthand by taking them to the Eno State Park, which is a great way for them just to have a little bit of relaxation, play around in the water, go on a wonderful little hike. They'll get their hands dirty, both literally at the Duke Campus Farm with solution-based sustainability. They will learn about local climate justice efforts from the people doing the work locally. And so, yes, there's a lot of opportunities on campus, but there's dozens of organizations that we invite during this week to make sure that students are like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing that I could potentially get involved with. How do I like volunteer with you? How do I work with you as a summer intern, et cetera? Like to take people to kayaking, which was a big hit last year. It's a great way just to like go out and just relax. We're trying to make sure that orientation is not too knowledge heavy. We do want to infuse knowledge, but we also want them to have some downtime so they can build those wonderful memories. Channel their creativity and upcycled crafts, whether it's a mending workshop or embroidery or taking a bunch of old t-shirts and turning them into tote bags. Picking up local goods at the Durham Farmers Market, which is located about a mile from East Campus, which is where your students will be living, and just making sure that they're like, this is a resource. It's a wonderful walk on a Saturday morning. Definitely go out and meet your local farmers. And then so many more things. But by the end of it, like they all build their community. And we have, I think, 115 students who are a part of this. And they also get to engage with upper class students like sophomores, juniors, and seniors to also maybe build some mentorship relationships and to get firsthand knowledge of what has happened to date on campus. They can also take a class. There's no shortage of classes. I know some students will be wanting to take it within their discipline, but some of them might want to take it in a slightly different area. And so here's just a smattering of examples, such as University 102, Let's Talk About Climate Change, which is taught by 12 different faculty from 12 different disciplines. So it's a really great way for them to see the diversity of climate and sustainability work, both here on campus as well as regardless of discipline, where they could potentially aim towards in the future. Theory and Practice of Sustainability is a really great class that folks do client-based work, which you don't normally get in an undergrad experience. And so it's a really great way to really test your knowledge by working with clients both on campus and in the community. I won't read through all of these. Climate Change for Future Leaders, because that's what our students are. They're future leaders. And so they might be really interested in learning how to be those, like, get the basic knowledge that they need to really launch their leadership career. Thinking about conservation biology for coastal ecosystems. We have a marine lab that I mentioned. If your student is ever interested in a study abroad, but a little bit more local, the marine lab is a great way to do a semester-long journey. You're like me, my background was economics. ESG, or environment, social, and governance investing, is a big hot topic right now in the investment world. So they might want to go and learn about this. Yes, it says 587, which means it's typically graduate level, but I'm sure some of the faculty in those upper level classes would let a really outstanding senior into it. In African and American studies, climate change, decolonization, and global Blackness. This is something that I think would be an incredibly fascinating topic to go into, particularly related to the book that we're having all the first years read. And last one that I'm a big fan of, Fast Connections, which I think is something that I don't know many other schools that have a program like this, but the way that this works is it is a program that brings students, staff, and faculty from all different disciplines, all different departments, both undergrad and graduate students, bring them together and really talk about ways that they are working on a client-based project. I've led 8 of them, and each of them have been different year over year. One year I had students who I was like, let's work on residential solar program and how to actually induce people to put solar on the roof. And those students actually led to 160 kilowatts of solar being installed in the local area. And that's something they can really put on a resume. And so I'm highly recommending that they look into these types of classes. And there's not just like climate sustainability ones, there's ones that are on human health. They can definitely find whatever pathway, but you get into a really small group, you really work towards a wonderful end result that fits out or stands out really well on a resume. Some of these photos I put over on the side. Here's a group of our students who went to the United Nations COP meeting, which is basically the international climate meeting. And so there's a class that leads this every year that's open to upper class seniors. Here's some students working on some engineering projects if you have an engineering student. And then the very last one, students in Duke Forest, like I said, our biggest living laboratory, so a really great space for them to go and engage. And we have over a dozen climate sustainability focused student clubs on campus where they will be able to find their community that is not in the classroom, but outside. The first one on the list, Sustainability Ambassadors, is a program that we actually run that is only geared towards first year students, trying to really get them into the climate sustainability work on campus, and more commonly, like really thinking about how it's applied across the world. We also have the Environmental Alliance, who just put on this event, our Earth Week event. And here we are, that's me and that's Sophia, doing our Devil's Thrift House, which is a pop-up thrift store that tends to garner so many students because they're like, free clothes, let's do it. Duke Energy Club, Food for Thought. Duke Smart Home is one of our more sustainable houses on campus, and it's a house for 10 students, some engineering, some environmental students, and they live there and they kind of put climate sustainability into practice while also building community. If your student is interested, definitely have them reach out to me. I'm happy to share some details. And if your student really wants to get involved in Duke student government, one of the aspects of it is the Undergrad Environmental Union, which is kind of an umbrella organization for all undergrad related climate sustainability groups. And so if they want that type of leadership, look no further. That's a great space. And last slide before the Q&A kicks off. If you or your student are interested in learning more about climate sustainability at Duke, here's some really easy links that you can start following. We have a climate commitment website as well as our Sustainable Duke website. And following us on Instagram and signing up for our newsletter. So IG being Instagram, but I put it for our Office of Climate Sustainability. This is my cat. I mentioned he might join at some point. But it's a really great way for you to start dipping your toes in the water before your student comes to campus. So they can really already get in the know and hit the ground running when they join. But without further ado, we have time for Q&A. I feel like I've been seeing some chat happening, so I'm gonna stop sharing so I can actually look at it.
Thank you, Jason. That was incredibly thorough. I feel like I learned so much even as a staff member. It also, I don't know, it feels fitting that the cat's here with us. It works. There are multiple questions in the Q&A. Some of them have been answered by Sophia. I may still sort of expand on some of them because I think they could lead to some fruitful discussion. If I may, I know someone asked about healthy food on campus and how you all are interacting with providing food on campus from local farms, sort of emphasis on the fresh. And I wonder if maybe in that answer, I know Sophia mentioned this, but it's a great initiative to highlight. You could answer that however, but maybe talk about Blue Devil Market as one of the options and ways that that's being provided to campus.
Yeah. Sophia, do you want to take it away, and then I can add in other details later?
Sure. Yeah, this is a wonderful question, and an exciting opportunity to highlight Blue Devil Market. This was an initiative actually proposed by, I believe it was a residential coordinator, saw a need and had some wonderful student feedback on the opportunity to provide an event like this. So this is a pop-up that happens a couple times a semester sorry, I'm getting a weird notification, connects vendors from the community, the Duke Campus Farm, and other folks from Duke and Durham to bring local fresh food to students. So this is a really exciting engagement opportunity where it not only brings students the fresh food, but also I think in a world where there's a lot of distance between us and where our food comes from a lot of the time, gives students an opportunity to have that bigger conversation of where is my food being grown, how is it being grown, and what does it take, and what could the footprint look like in a thoughtful, sustainable approach versus more a conventional approach. So that's just one event that some really talented folks in the community help put on pretty regularly. I also mentioned some shuttles to the Durham Farmers Market, which is always a lot of fun. Those are Saturday mornings. There's always live music and just dozens of vendors, and having the chance to again engage with that component of community where our food is coming from are great hits. So while there is the packaged stuff in the store that is shelf stable and there is a need for, sometimes there are also so many opportunities to connect students to really vibrant, fresh, wonderful foods. One thing I touched on a little bit in the chat is that integrating sustainably produced fresh foods is a core part of Duke Dining's sustainability strategy. I can share the link to their report that was put together recently. But never fear, there are lots of opportunities for folks to enjoy, again, the fresh, local, nutrient-dense foods that also connect you with the community facet of sustainability. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and sometimes, like I mentioned with orientation, we actually take the students to the farmers market. It's a short walk, especially when the weather is really wonderful. We've also taken our ambassador students as well as our Green Devils, which are our interns on campus. And so we're always happy to be that. Like, I find that a lot of things are scary the first time, like going to the gym, but if you have a buddy, it makes it a little bit easier. And so we're always happy to be that support in bringing folks. But the other thing, like with the Duke Campus Farm, that's a great way to actually go out and grow your own food, but also get to take some yum yums with you as you're leaving, because there's usually some available that you harvested. I know that Sophia and I, we tend to go out during the summertime. Yes, it's incredibly hot, but it's a wonderful break from sitting in front of a computer all day. And we'll harvest things like tomatoes, or we'll plant watermelon, whatever it might be. And it's a really interesting way for folks to actually understand where food comes from. It's amazing how many even adults don't know how food is grown. And so we're hoping to kind of bridge that gap by actually showing it how it happens in real life.
Thanks so much for that. There are multiple questions about EV charging, right? Which I know in my media is becoming more and more part of the conversation. So can you share more about what chargers are on campus, maybe how many, plans for expansion, anything else you want to share about EV charging and our commitment?
Yeah, and so we just wrapped up our electric fleet conversation, as well as realizing you can have as many electric vehicles as you want, but if you don't have charging infrastructure, you got a bunch of heavy paperweights. And so we really, that there's a lot of opportunity to expand EV charging. Right now we have around 30 chargers all across campus, but they're not always in spaces that students would find. And so like if you're an undergrad student and parking in the blue zone, I'm not entirely sure there's an EV charger over in that area. Typically, like when Sophia and I talk, and we try not to encourage folks to bring their vehicle to campus because a lot of the times the surrounding area in downtown is pretty walkable. There's grocery stores like a Whole Foods, a Harris Teeter, our local co-op are all really close to campus, but some students might want to travel home. Laundry always needs to be done, right? And so realizing that some students will be coming to campus, if you have any specific location ideas, we're looking into kind of creating an EV charging hub with fast chargers. So that way, like maybe the student only needs to like charge for like 20 minutes and then they're good for a week versus actually like having a bunch of lower wattage chargers all across campus. And so we're hoping to open up something like that on central campus. So the student could easily drive there in a few minutes and then drive back to their parking spot. But the infrastructure does have to be built, but it's definitely a part of the strategic plan.
Great, thanks, Jason. I have a question building on, you mentioned at some point in the presentation, this desire to have current students, right? I know we have families from first year to fourth year on right now, be fluent in climate and sustainability. And the approach there is a lot about the academic side and integrating that into academics. To what degree is your team also thinking about that outside of academia? Like I'm wondering, an average Joe, who maybe climate and sustainability is not the forefront of their like top priorities at Duke, in what ways do you think that they're going to interact throughout their 4 years?
Yeah, and so when we were initially talking about climate sustainability, we first were talking about literacy, meaning like a person's able to like read and understand it, but thinking about foreign language, we're like, well, we want them to be fluent. We want them to be able to have actionable conversations. And a student might not have the time to take a full semester long class. So really need to be thoughtful about the a la carte menu of things that are available. That could be working at the Duke Campus Farm for a single day, volunteering with us, joining our ambassadors program, which is a pretty small commitment in the grand scheme of the world compared to many classes. Internships are always a thing. And so when I was, granted, I was at the Nicholas School of the Environment, so I definitely had a little bit more stake in the game, but my internships were the things that really helped me really solidify what I was learning in the classroom. And so my first one, I worked with the Nature Conservancy on wildland firefighting, something that was really fun and awesome to do. And then the other was working with Duke University's landscape services to really think about our urban forest on campus. And so me and another grad student started the urban forestry campus tree inventory 15 years ago. That's fine. And that was a really great way for us to really solidify a lot of the work that we were doing in the classroom, but also making quite a big impact that is still being used to this date. The other things to consider is that it can happen in a conversation over a lunch and learn. It can easily happen in a classroom that might be focused on economics or biology, but maybe they'll use a data set that is tied to climate and sustainability. And so we're really trying to be thoughtful about the a la carte menu because we don't want to say this is the specific pipeline anybody has to follow. Students and their parents are paying a lot of money to come here and they should be able to chart their own journey to a large degree. And so we're also trying to find ways that regardless of the discipline, we are working to find ways to infuse climate sustainability in small ways or big ways in the existing classrooms. And a lot of that actually comes with faculty training. And so we have a program called Climate Sustainability Teaching Fellows or CAST Fellows. And it's a really great way for us to work with those faculty who said, well, I'm teaching a class on like intro nursing. How do I infuse sustainability here? And then we'll actually meet with them to say like, here are some ideas. Here are some research papers you might be able to use. Here's some topics that you can consider having discussions about. And I find those types of things to be really fruitful. And the faculty seem to be pretty excited about this opportunity to infuse like more updated lingo into their work, but also having the support of our team as well as other folks in the Office of Climate Sustainability to really connect them to the space on campus or in the community.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to call out to our families. We are wrapping up quickly. So if you have any other burning questions, this is your time to put it in the Q&A. We may have time for one or two more. Another question for you all. I think that we are always working at Duke. We're always impressed with how students move us forward in our work. And I know you mentioned that the office started with a recent grad, I think, who said, this office needs to exist. I'm curious, what other ways do you see that students are advancing the work of the office in the climate commitment at large?
Yeah, the students are the lifeblood of the university. They're the ones who have their ear to the ground of all the new technology, all the new campaigns, all the work that is happening, and it helps keep us refreshed. Like I've been working with Sustainable Duke for 10 years, and without students, I might feel some burnout doing the same thing, but they're always bringing in new passion and new energy that keeps us energized. Um, so many of the students right now are not even also just thinking about what's being done on campus, but how those, like what might be happening on campus are larger manifestations of other things going on. And so really being able to question the systems that we find ourselves in and whether or not they're doing what's best for us. And so a lot of students are really interested in like, can capitalism save the climate? Can it not? And those types of conversations are things that are just so fruitful and fascinating. Will we get to an answer by the end of their academic career? Maybe not, but it might spring them into, you know, graduate school, getting a PhD, or going to work in spaces that really dive in deeply to these types of questions. And so the other thing, and Sophia can talk about this much more, our students, we have just most wonderful conversations with them, and they really see us as a resource, but I see them more as a resource of just being able to have that wonderful, like, we just had a crafting day just to kind of kick off the, like, you made it through the end of the semester, congratulations, had a little picnic in the garden with some crafts. And they were all like, it's amazing to see them at the start of their career to where they're at now, really learning so much, and not just about themselves and Duke, but like how to like work through climate anxiety, which has a lot of how they work with regular anxiety. And just being able to see them really hone their reflection skills has been so refreshing. I was not as astute when I was an undergrad, so really exciting to see these kids these days.
Yeah, I apologize. I missed the question while I was typing an answer to another question, but I'll echo some of the things Jason shared. I think my favorite part of this job is the students that I get to work with and just truly being energized by their creativity, their commitment, and dedication to really moving the needle on making progress on this. This being the climate and sustainability movement and working to ensure that there is going to be secure and intentional future on the horizon for all of us, us being, I think, the whole world. And so just having the chance to work with folks I do and exist in the communities that I do, I find both incredibly professionally rewarding and also very personally rewarding, as that community piece is really important to ensuring this work is personally sustainable. It is hard work when you care so deeply about all of these pieces, but when you're surrounded by the people that we are at Duke, it is possible, and it feels really good to be a part of.
And that is an incredible way to wrap up this webinar. Thank you so much to Sophia and Jason for your time this evening. Thanks to our families for tuning in. I'll make a quick little nod right to any families from the class of 2024. Congratulations. Thanks for being with us the last 4 years. Hopefully when you're on campus for commencement, you can explore the Duke Forest or the Duke Gardens. This is our last webinar for the year for our other families, so we'll continue our family webinar series next year. We'll also continue, I guess, next academic year. We'll also continue our newsletters next fall. We'll take a little hiatus for the summer. So thank you again for joining us. We are recording this. It'll be posted on our family website within about 48 hours. We hope you all have a wonderful evening or day. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks so much, y'all.